Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and connoisseurs of the written word. Today, we are going to discuss a word that is after my own heart, the word laconic. Laconic. That's not a G you have in that picture there that I painted, perhaps not too well. It is an O. Laconic. Okay, to understand this word, the full impact and import of this word, we need to step back into history. Now we all know about ancient Sparta. We know how brave their soldiers were, and Sparta was actually a city in a broader area called Laconia. Okay, so these Spartan soldiers, whose courage, of course, was and still is world famous, were men of very few words. They didn't speak much, as expected. We tend to associate um, strength with silence. Okay, quiet waters flow deep, runs the aphorism, and it is usually true. Although some people are silent simply because they don't have anything to say, not very imaginative, not very intellectual. But in this case, silence is clearly a sign of strength in the Spartan soldier. And even in our daily life, we tend to like people who are silent. There are two reasons for this. One is people like that don't tend to stick their nose into other people's affairs, they don't gossip. So you feel you can trust them with what you say. So we like them for that reason. And there's a second reason. Um, we always become more calm in the presence of silence. And when there's a silent person around us, he or she tends to calm us. So that's another reason why we like silent people. And finally, the third reason is a bit more philosophical and more broad in its implications. And it goes back to what I said earlier, namely that quiet waters flow deep. We realize that such people usually have a great deal of inner strength, and we respect strength. Strength could be misused or used profitably, um, and socially for the good, for the general good. But we do respect it. So we see silent people as strong people. Okay, so we have at least three reasons why we like silent people. Consequently, we would like to use a word that's a bit more powerful and which is more historically evocative than the word silent. And fortunately, we do have such a word, and that word is laconic, going back to the region these Spartan soldiers came from in ancient Greece, the region called Laconia. These people, these soldiers spoke in very short, brief sentences, um, and such a speech was called laconic speech. Laconic speech. So there you have it. Uh, Laconic, and there's another adverb too associated with laconic, and that word is laconically. Let us write that out. So there we have it. I think it is not very clear, so let me move that a little bit. That way you can see it better. Yeah. So we have laconically, and we have laconic. I like the word laconic because it is short and uh, pretty much sounds the way its meaning uh, is meant is the way its meaning is actually. So laconically is a bit too long, bit too stretched out, not quite so elegant as laconic. So unless you really need to use it, I recommend that you don't use the word laconically. But let us see how these two words are used. Okay, you could say that Hercules, okay, obviously an epitome of strength. Hercules was a man who spoke very little. His speech was laconic and abrupt. Most of the time, he said nothing. Okay, so that's one word, one way of using the word laconic. Another, let's use it in another sentence. Okay, it's very nice to be brief and succinct, but often if you're very brief and succinct, people don't understand what you're saying. You need to elaborate. So let's use the word laconic in that sense. His speech was so laconic, his conversation was so laconic that often his listeners were not clear what he exactly meant and were too afraid to ask him, fearing that they would evoke his ire by doing so. So here, the word laconic is not necessarily used in a complimentary sense. Okay, and but it corresponds to real life. We actually met people like that who speak in monosyllables. Monosyllables. We'll explain that word also later on. And we're not clear uh, exactly what they mean. They need to elaborate, but they don't. They will not make good speechwriters or good orators, but that's how they are. We can't change them. And like I said, in spite of all that, we tend to like them. So these are the two ways in which you can use the word uh, laconic. Okay, it's a lovely word, very pretty, very elegant, and basically epitomizes strength. Instead of saying someone is a silent person, if you said he was a laconic person, it would have a lot more impact. There's a lot more reverberation coming in from history when you use this word, almost as if you're going back to ancient Sparta and describing one of those soldiers when you describe someone today in real life. So, laconically, as I said, try not to use it. That why hanging at the end somehow spoils the beauty of the word. But that's an adverb, and since it's a legitimate word, we may as well see a sentence in which it is used. In fact, we already used it earlier when referring to the second kind of person who doesn't express himself very well. Okay, here goes. He spoke so laconically that his listeners were unsure what he meant and were afraid to ask him to clarify himself. Okay, so uh, I guess that pretty much covers these two words. Next time you go to your office and meet a colleague who is excessively silent, a pretty girl perhaps, and that is true. That's another strange thing I noticed in life, that women of great beauty often tend to be silent, and that kind of adds to their beauty. That silence is like a halo around them. They don't talk a whole lot, and we don't want them to talk a whole lot either. You don't expect a goddess to be loquacious. Okay, that's a word for talkative. We'll get to that word too. But yeah, deep people, beautiful people are not talkative. They're not chatterboxes. They're not garrulous. Okay, all these words will explain it later in other YouTube videos. Okay, so you can tell him or her, "Hey man, you're really laconic." And if his name is Leonard or Leon, and her name is Leonora, that would add an alliterative appeal to your sentence. You could say, Leonard, you're laconic. Or you could say, Leonara, you're so laconic. So it's almost like a sing song sentence. I'm sure, even though they're silent, I'm sure you'll bring a smile to their face. And if it's a pretty girl, that smile will make your day. Okay? All right, guys, that's it all for today. Mull over this word, use it in a couple of sentences inside your head, make it a part of your giant genius vocabulary. Bye for now.